It's time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the Property Podcast. Yes, we're back. It is a property podcast. I'm Rob Bence. With me is Rob Dix. Hey, Rob. How's it going?
I'm very well, thank you, Rob. So in recent weeks, we've had lots of guests on the show, but this week it is just us and you, the listener, because it is a listener questions episode. So we've asked for your questions. You've sent them in. We're going to be going through all of those, and we've got lots of updates as well. We've got a great resource of the week. We've got a news story. There is a lot to pack in.
There is, but before we get going, it's been a while since we've done listener reviews, and over the last few weeks we've had a surge and we've not been asking for them. So thank you so much to everyone who has taken the time to leave us a review. We really do appreciate it. But without further ado, let's get back on track, Rob. Get that cheesy clapping noise on. It's time to go through some reviews. So our first review comes from Wall149, and it says, "It's all been said, but yes, it is possible to nitpick almost any published work. That's all I could do, but I'm not going to. The guys do a fantastic job, almost too good really. They make it easy and don't seem to worry about the extra competition they might be creating in the market. I wish you well with the Property Hub too. Seriously good information, opinion and analysis. I'm particularly impressed by the holistic approach to business. Recommending, as they do, general personal development as well as resources to help." Oh, he's put his real name at the end, that's Richard. Stan says, "For me, there's no doubt now this has to be the best podcast on this subject available. I've had time to listen to the US and Australian offerings, and the two Robs have nailed it. Not only is this top content, but the presentation compared to others is far more professional." You might be getting a bit bored now with these 5-star reviews. No, we're not. But you both deserve them. Thank you, Stan. And he says he's reviewed for the second time, moving his review from 4 to 5 stars. Well, thank you, Stan. I really appreciate that adjustment. Ben says, "Great information. There's a podcast for everything these days, and I'm very happy this one exists. I'm looking for my first investment property in 2014, and hopefully this advice will stand me in good stead." That's from Ben, houseplanninghelp.com. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Really, really great to get the reviews. We appreciate them so much. It really keeps us motivated. So thank you, everyone who's taken the time. And if we haven't read yours out yet, we will get there. We've just got a bit of catching up to do. So, Rob, we've got a few updates this week. Lots has been going on, but we've also got loads of listener questions to get through. So let's whip through what we've been up to. The biggest news for me is our Northern meetup. The people have spoken, Rob, and they're going to your house. That's suspicious, isn't it?
Well, not quite my house, because someone's letting it. But yes, we are going back to Liverpool. We are going back, and I'm really happy. It's going to be a great day. We've got a great location. It's on the Albert Dock, if anybody knows Liverpool. So we're well located for everyone to come along. And I'm just really looking forward to meeting a different group of people who've maybe not been able to join us at the London meetups. And, you know, we'll both travel up for this one. And we're more than happy to, because Liverpool's a great city. And we're really looking forward to meeting some of our listeners in a different arena.
Yeah, I've seen some of the ticket bookings coming through already because we've announced it on the Property Hub, and there's lots of familiar names, people who I've not had a chance to meet in person, but we know who've either left us a review or a voicemail or we've seen in the Hub. It's going to be really great to meet them face to face. So this is on the 21st of April. So if you're listening to the podcast on the day it comes out, as you should be, you've got about 10, 11 days or so. It's on the Easter Monday. So if you had a long weekend with the family, they're sick of you banging on about property, come over to us. We'll be happy to talk about it for a few hours. If you want to book a ticket, it's completely free. We just need to get your name down so we know how many people are coming. To do it, just go to thepropertyhub.net/Liverpool. It's as easy as that. You'll find a link there to the venue information, to go and register for your ticket and everything else you need to know.
Easy. Well, we hope to see you there. But Rob, that's not it. This episode's not called Listener Questions and Updates for Nothing, because we've obviously got Yellow Lettings updates to give you.
Yeah, we have. So in the interim, while we've been doing these pre-recorded interviews, we've had a few people asking about Yellow Lettings and what's going on with that. And the answer is we've actually taken on our first properties. Just a handful. We're taking it slowly. We're going to be bringing on new areas over time. But so far, so good. We're really enjoying the experience, learning a lot all the time. And so far, our landlords are happy as well. So we're going to be bringing some more areas online over the next couple of months. So if you haven't yet registered and you want to know when we're launching in your area, go over to yellowlettings.net. It's yellowlettings.net. Put in your details there and we'll get in touch with you when we're in your area. And we'll be doing updates on the podcast as well, of course.
Of course. If that's not enough updates for you, I've also moved offices with RMP Property. So it's happened. So it's been a while since I gave you an update on RMP Property. We've got all those new starters well bedded in now. They're doing a fantastic job, and you could probably hear a few of their voices on Property News Radio. In fact, there's another extra bonus update. Property News Radio's got a new format. I now do it with my team just to mix it up a little bit because I was getting lonely. So you can listen to that. I'll link to it in the show notes. But we've moved offices. We are almost there. All the furniture's pretty much been delivered now. And Rob, you're back in London soon, so you'll have to come in and see. But we've got lovely, colourful chairs. So guess what colour I chose?
Could it be yellow?
It was yellow.
Hey, excellent stuff. I'm really looking forward to seeing that in person. And yeah, it's great to hear that everything's getting settled. I know you had a really frenetic time for a while, but hopefully it now means you're going to be able to serve even more people without losing your mind completely.
That's the plan. Okay, yeah. So news this week. And we could only really go with this story, and it's the pension reforms. As this is such a big story, we've decided to dedicate a whole episode to this, which will be next week's episode. But let's just give you the headlines. The budget, which when you listened to this a few weeks ago, when it came out, seemed pretty dull. But the Chancellor threw a curveball, and what a curveball it was, right near the end, to announce these pension reforms. Effectively, what's happened is that from April 2015, people will have freedom to use their pension pots as they choose. Now, there's lots of detail to go into. Okay, that's the first thing I'd say. But most people were forced to buy an annuity when they retired. I'm not a big fan of annuities, hence the name RMP, which stands for Rescue My Pension. I'm not a big fan of pensions. So I have to say this is a super positive news. Whether you're going to invest it in property or not doesn't matter. I think it's just having the choice, which is really good to be able to make your own mind up and not have it dictated for you. So we've got lots to talk about next week. It's going to be a really interesting episode, I can promise you. But it's obviously with the focus on property. And in particular, what's it going to do to the market? We'll talk about, the potential options you have to use your pension to invest. But actually, I think the bigger story is that a lot of people will end up investing in property and it will have an impact on the property market. So how's that going to affect you as an investor now? Or if you're not an investor yet, how will it affect you if you don't invest before 2015? So much to cover, and that's why we're going to do a whole podcast on it.
Yeah, so that is to come. But if you're not fully up to the speed with the story and you want to get the basics before we go and talk about the implications next week, there's a link in the show notes to a really good news story that explains some of it. If you want to find that link and all the links to everything else we've mentioned in this episode, including booking your tickets for the event and everything else, you'll find that at thepropertyhub.net/questions. And speaking of questions, let's get into the topic of the week, shall we? So we last did listener questions quite a while back. We like to do them every so often because we get great questions in over voicemail and email, and there's things people ask to us. We like to batch them up and get through as many as we can in one go. And that's what we're going to do today. Now, if you are a member of the Property Hub Plus, you'll have heard us do this more recently than if you're not, because every month we do a live Q&A for Property Hub Plus members. So if you want to get your questions answered more frequently and you want to sign up for Plus as a result, that is closed at the moment, but we will be reopening Plus soon. So if you want to get on the waiting list for that and be sure of getting in when we reopen, thepropertyhub.net/plus is the place to go. So we've got lots of questions to get through today. The first one has come in over voicemail from Ben Adam Smith from the House Planning Help podcast. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hi, Rob and Rob. My name is Ben Adam Smith. My wife and I are looking into our first investment property, which is really exciting. And thank you so much for all the information that you've had on the podcast. It's been very helpful. A friend of ours has 2 properties with a private guaranteed rent scheme. And so my question is on this. It's a private company that have been going for quite a long time and have about 200 to 300 landlords on their books. But they have a contract themselves with a local authority. So my question is, are there any points that I should watch out for? I've asked as many questions as I can think about before we proceed into this. Thanks a lot for your help.
Okay, so Ben is asking about guaranteed rent schemes, and I know what he's talking about, but just to clarify, because there might be some confusion over the terminology. What Ben is talking about is these LHA schemes, where the company that you let your property to has a contract with the local council to house people on their list who need housing, and they take care of it and manage that process for you. There are other non-LHA schemes which operate by certain estate agents who will guarantee you the rent, but then they will just rent it out privately as if they were the landlord. So what they do is they guarantee you a rent, but they guarantee you a fairly significantly lower rent than you would normally get, because obviously they need to cover themselves in the event of voids, because if the property is empty, they still need to pay you. So that's another type of guaranteed rent schemes. And then there's also rent guarantee insurance, and that's a product you can buy to protect yourself and guarantee the rent if the tenant doesn't pay you. And there are various types of that, including some where you get paid in arrears, some which are more expensive where you get paid guaranteed on the day whether the tenant pays you or not. So there's all these different types of guarantees. But Ben is asking specifically about the LHA schemes. And this is something that I've got a bit of experience of because I had a property let out through one of these schemes. I gave my property to one of these schemes a few years ago when I was still working full time and running a business in a different industry. And the appealing thing for me was that I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have any time, but I wanted to invest in property. And so I thought, great, I will give it to this private company, they will give it to the council, and I get rent dropping into my bank account every month, and I do not have to lift a finger. They'll take care of maintenance. I'm definitely going to get my payment every month. If it's empty, they'll find new tenants. That was the idea, and that was how it worked out. So Ben was asking for anything he should be aware of or any questions he should ask. My experience was broadly positive, but I recently took it back and I'm now renting it out privately. And I did this blog post a while back about whether I should take it back from them or not when my contract was up. And the reason I did it was purely because the rent that they were paying me was so much lower than I could get privately. So in the end, the differential just became too much. When the government made some changes a while back, they reduced the amount they were paying me, and the private rents in the area were going up and up. So in the end, the gap was so large, it's like, no, I'm just not making enough here. I could be getting so much more. So in the process, there's a couple of things that I should say to watch out for. One of them is what I just mentioned. The government made some changes and they reduced what they were paying me. And you'll probably find in their contract that there will be clauses allowing them to sort of rip up the contract and renegotiate whenever they want. And you can't do that because, of course, if they're getting paid less, they can't pay you the same amount as they were paying you before. Another thing is just a general point about the contract. The contracts are often quite one-sided. So, for example, the contract might be for 3 years, and then be a clause in there saying that if they feel like it, they can give it back to you with a month's notice. But you can't do the same to them. You are tied in for the 3 years, whatever happens, and there's no way of getting out of it. So these contracts are quite one-sided. It depends how bothered you are about that and about them having more flexibility than you do. The final thing is they're supposed to give it back to you in the same condition that you gave it to them, with the exception of fair wear and tear. I think if my experience was anything to go by, their definition of wear and tear is very different from mine. So they paid me some compensation because of damage that had been done, but there's other stuff where if I'd got it back from a private tenant in that state, I would have been taking a lot out of their deposit to cover it. And I wasn't able to because they considered it to be fair wear and tear, and there's nothing you can do to argue with it. So those are the only warning points, Ben, that I've got about those schemes. I think my experience is fairly typical. So they are the things to watch out for. If you can live with those things, then go for it. But if you have to look into if the private demand is there, what is the extra effort on your part and what is the extra reward, and then make a call as to which way to go.
Wowzers, that was some answer. Tell you what, Ben, you got your money's worth there, didn't you, out of that question? That was awesome, Rob.
Yeah, there you go. He asked the question and I just happened to have just gone through this, so his timing was good. You should check out the House Planning Help podcast, which Ben runs as well. We'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Fantastic. Okay. Andy Norman, regular contributor in the Property Hub. He has asked the question. And in fact, he asked this question on the Property Hub Plus Q&A. And just as we were leaving, the question popped up, so we didn't get a chance to answer it. So, Andy, we didn't ignore it. Here it is. If your buy-to-let property value has dropped below the outstanding mortgage, should I pay off some of the capital to, say, 75% LTV? My interpretation of this question is, if I drop into possible negative equity or the property prices drop low enough where I can't get a mortgage, should I pay off some of the capital to then be able to finance that 75%? It depends. And it depends on how strong your cash flow is. Because for me, if I'm cash flowing well, I don't really mind if my property's in negative equity, not worth much more than a mortgage or worth a lot more than a mortgage. My cash flow is important because short-term fluctuations in the market don't worry me. Prime example, one of my properties up until very recently was in negative equity, but it paid me a profit every single month. If I could go back in time and sell it a few years ago for, what I bought it for, would I have done so? No, because it's an asset. It's been paying me. And negative equity is almost a mindset. Will you let it worry you or not? For me, as long as my rent was being paid and I had a healthy cash flow, it didn't bother me. I could definitely employ the capital somewhere else and get a better return. So it's that opportunity cost. If I was to put £20,000, say, to pay down some of that debt, could I have made that £20,000 work harder elsewhere? And the answer is almost certainly yes. I mean, it'd be pretty awful if I couldn't do what I do. But for most people, it's probably yes as well. I hope that answers your question, Andy. But there are exceptions. If your cash flow is poor, it's costing you. So it's no longer an asset. It's a liability. And that could be because your mortgage product has gone to an exceptionally high rate for some reason. So there you need to, refinance it to another mortgage product. But that being said, they're all redundant if you've got a strong cash flow.
Okay, the next question is from Mandy Jenkins. And this is a question that I've been asked a few times over email recently, actually. And she asked, do I need to set up a limited company straight away to keep my investments separate from my personal finances? This is one that seems to come up all the time, and it's a bit of a misconception. In the vast majority of cases, you don't want to be investing through a limited company. You can do that. There are reasons why you might want to do that, but in the vast majority of cases, you don't want to. And we've talked about this before. And the main reason is it's very hard to get lending through a company at the same loan to value as you can if you're doing individually. But I think people kind of have this misconception because we're always talking about treating property like a business. And it is very important to keep your personal finances separate from your property finances. But you do not need a limited company to do that. All you need is a separate bank account in your own name. So that should be dead easy. It could even be just an additional savings account with your same bank. It doesn't really matter. So it's great to keep your finances separate. And Mandy's doing exactly the right thing by thinking about that before she's even started and planning to go about things the right way. But she doesn't need to be setting up a limited company unless she's taken financial advice from someone who knows her circumstances better than we do and says that that's the way to go.
Yeah, at the property strategy meetings I do at RMP, this is like one of the top questions that come out time and time again. And it's all about leverage. For most people, leverage is a fantastic tool you can use for property investment. And you can't leverage as much if you set up as a company. And it's easy to understand why. A company can just be dissolved at the stroke of a signature. So the banks are at high risk lending to companies. So lending to individuals who they can chase for that debt if needed is a far safer bet. So that's why they'll lend more to individuals than they will companies, especially new companies. I hope that answers your question, Mandy. So Rob, we've got another voicemail and this one comes in from Colin Wright.
Hi, I'm calling from Dubai. This is where I live, and just listen to your show. I think it's very informative, and it's good to hear some professionals speaking about such a subject. I also invest in cities, including Liverpool and others in the UK. I just wanted to know, what's your return on capital invested policy? Do you, when you take into account all of your costs, including obviously the amortization of your mortgage, service charges, ground rents, and everything else, what do you look for typically as a net return against capital invested, considering that typically more banks are only lending at about 75% today, and if you're borrowing through a company, probably 50%. I'd be interested to understand your return with an amortized mortgage. Keep up the good work, and I'll carry on listening. Bye. My name's Colin, by the way.
So thank you, Colin. So Colin's really asking there, what return on capital employed, or as we often call it, return on investment, do you look for? I'm going to say the word again, but it depends. And it depends on the type of asset or investment strategy you're employing. So, for example, I would look for a different ROI if I was doing HMOs compared to standard buy-to-lets. And there's multiple strategies, there's just two to begin with. But for me personally, I invest in properties that are in good condition, in good areas, but also I look for good return. So my ROI, I'm looking for 10%. A steady 10%. And that's using really conservative numbers. I use 5% interest rates for mortgages, and most people can get well less than that. I use conservative rental estimations when I look at the rents. And this is all the things we do at RMP too. So we could jazz up the ROIs to make them look incredible, but I prefer just to go conservative. And if it looks good when you're being conservative, then it's worth further investigation. So for me personally, it's around that sort of 10% number, 8 to 10%, a little bit more. Yeah, fantastic. But that's where I'm looking.
Yep, that sounds about right to me. But then, as you said, if you're looking into HMOs, you could get 3 times that. But then, of course, there are going to be additional efforts, risks, and all sorts associated with that. So you're really being rewarded for that. So yeah, it does depend on the investment type. And I don't have personally a hard rule about the number that I look for. And maybe it'd be helpful if I did, but I tend to look for opportunities, and there are often lots of factors in the mix, some to do with the numbers and some other than that. And that means that it just makes it very difficult for me to say, this is my number. I think the range that you've given, Rob, is probably a pretty sensible one. Okay, Rob, here's one for you, and I've got a feeling this one is my fault. So we've got a question in from David. He said, I've heard that buying below market value isn't really possible. Can it be done? And if so, how? And this might have sprung from me because on a recent Property Geek podcast, I interviewed Damien Fogg. We had a really interesting conversation, and one of the things that he said was he does not believe in below market value. So, Rob, here is your platform. Are you going to defend BMV?
I think Damien's right. In most cases, it's hard to do. But Damien's already won the argument for me because he said he gets 5% himself. So maybe Damien just can't get higher levels. So that's fine because it's hard to do as an individual. I understand the challenges. It's not easy. I apologise if I've ever made it seem easy because I know the podcasts, we talk for half an hour and the concepts, great, go on, crack on. You should buy below market value. Maybe we have to sometimes, and I think this will be a good future episode on how hard buy-to-let can be, on how things can go wrong. And I think that'll be a really, really good thing to do. But is it possible? Well, I'd say yes, or lots of stupid people come to RMP. And the reason why I say that is I spend time educating people who come to work with us. We do the strategy meetings, we do example investments, we talk about their goals before we even look at property. And the reason why is I know what we do is really good. So if we struggle to get below market value property, then those people would go through all that time invested with them and then walk away and go, well, actually, Rob, thanks for the education, but that's actually rubbish what you do. The reason why we do all that is because we know we're good at what we do, so we don't have to do all that high pressure sales rubbish. A recent example was an investment in Sheffield where 6 investors who listen to the podcast have invested in, and we put the value at 90 and we said that our investors were getting them at 70 and it's about to complete. And the valuers have gone out, and I've never ever had an overvaluation done until the last few months. Okay, so RMP's been running for over 3 years. An overvaluation is where when you get a valuation report done, okay, if I say I'm buying this, so in this example, 70, we thought the value was at 90. When you go and get your mortgage, the valuers will come back and say it's 70 because they're just being asked by the mortgage company, is it worth what we're lending at? And they'll come back and say yes. So for 3 and a bit years, that's always happened. And then in the last couple of months, we've had 2 overvaluations. And this one in Sheffield's a prime example. We said the value was 90. We get them for 70. And the valuer came back at 115. So I don't know if he'd been in the pub before he did the valuation because I think he's overdone it. But I think that even if it is worth 95, 100, and we've said 90, I think we've been conservative. All 6 of those were by Property Podcast listeners, and the vast majority of those are people in the hub. So they can step forward and say it for themselves. So it's not just, is Rob making this up? So I'd say it is possible, but I'm going to say that it is hard work. in the property toolkit that I've put together, there's a BMV guide, an audio guide, which talks about what is BMV and what isn't. And Damien's right to be cautious, because there are lots and lots of cases of people being ripped off, lied to, use jazzed up marketing techniques to try and hoodwink people into thinking that they're buying below market value, and effectively just inflating the price and knocking some money off. But I've done an audio guide on this subject, so if you're interested, we'll link to it in the show notes so you can get a copy. And it talks about what is BMV, what isn't, and how you can get it yourself. Yes, we do it, but there's plenty of ways you can do it yourself. There's no secrets to this. It's just hard work.
Wow, another comprehensive answer. We've packed a lot into this episode. It's been quite a long one already. We've given some long answers. There are lots of links in the show notes at thepropertyhub.net/questions for even more reading and listening based on what we've talked about. But shall we just fit in one more question, Rob?
Go on, squeeze it in.
Okay, so this one comes in from Denise, and she says, I have one property which I inherited from my parents, refurbished it completely, then got a tenant via a letting agent 18 months ago, so I'm relatively new at this. I'm considering buying a second property and wondering whether it's best to take out a mortgage on the existing property to finance it, but I hate the idea of debt. So I think we can give a relatively quick answer to this one. And this is something we've talked about before as well. So yes, debt is often seen as a bad thing, and in many cases it is. But there is such a thing as good debt or useful debt. The idea is that bad debt, very obvious, credit card debt, car loans, anything where you buy something with it which doesn't actually generate you anything in return. You're stuck with the repayments and you don't have anything much to show for it. But a mortgage, if used in the right way and used in a sensible way, can be good debt because it allows you to buy an asset which generates money for you and goes up in value. Now, Denise clearly understands this because she's talking about taking out a mortgage to buy the second property. But I totally understand why, after years of people talking about how debt is bad, it can be emotionally very difficult, especially if you inherit a property which there's some kind of emotional connection to, you own it free and clear, and then you say, well, I'm taking on this risk now because I'm raising money against it. And yeah, I totally understand that. But I think the principles are very clear. And if you can get past the emotional aspect, if you take out a sensible mortgage against it and you invest wisely using that mortgage, then there's no reason to think of that as a bad thing at all. So maybe you should try and reconsider that I hate debt viewpoint, or just add a couple of caveats to it maybe.
Rob, I think you summed this up really well. It's just emotion, Denise. Because you've been told, and all of us have, all our lives, debt is bad, debt is bad, debt is bad, debt is bad. So no wonder when you get the opportunity to use debt, even in a good way, you're reluctant. But what I'd say is run the numbers. Okay, so take emotion out of it. Doesn't mean run the numbers by doing it. Get a pad and pen, calculator out and go, right, if I took £50,000 out of my property and I was borrowing at 4%, that's going to cost me X per month. So if I then put it into this property, it's going to generate a cash flow of X per month. Now, if there's a big cash flow surplus there, then your money is clearly working harder and you've got that protection buffer. You can listen to Rob and I, you can listen to other people. We'll say good debt is a good thing to do. People in the Property Hub forum will say good debt is a good thing to do. And any other property investors will probably tell you. And then there'll be people who don't invest in property go, oh no, debt is bad. But ignore everyone and get the spreadsheet out. Word the numbers, because people lie, but numbers rarely do. So get the numbers out and be honest with your numbers and let that make your decision for you. And you'll probably see, I'll be surprised if it doesn't show you, that actually good debt is a fantastic tool to use. Okay, so that's our questions for this week. Wow, we've packed a lot in, Rob. Lots and lots in there. Hope you've enjoyed it. We felt like we just needed to get it out of our system. Lots of property stuff to talk about because we've had 5 weeks of business or 6 weeks of business. We've absolutely loved it, but it's good to get back on the property track, Rob.
Yeah, it really is. And especially to get listeners involved. So thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions. We really appreciate it. The other thing that I'm really excited about this week as well is the long-awaited return of our resource of the week. We've had 6 weeks without that as well. So we've got quite a build-up of things we want to tell you about. But as this is a listener questions episode, we thought we should sort of let a listener sort of take this one and run with it as well. And this one comes from Guy Routledge. He's given us a couple of recommendations before, and he's come up with another blinder, hasn't he?
Guy Routledge should be our resource of the week go-to man, because he tells me about quite a few of them. There's more to come from him. So thank you, Guy. Keep them coming. I love what you're sending us. I've actually seen this mentioned in a few blogs I've been reading, so I'm glad you brought it to my attention, because it actually gave me the kick to download it, and it's really good. It's called the Momentum Chrome extension. So the app is called Momentum. Now, if you use Chrome as a browser, and I highly recommend you do, then you can get extensions which make your life easier. Amongst a lot of wonderful extensions are free add-ons. So, okay, let me explain what an extension is. So Chrome is what you use for the internet. So you've got Internet Explorer, you've got Firefox, and you've got Chrome. Chrome is run by Google. Chrome is really good for multiple reasons, which we're not going into now, but one of them is the extensions that you can use. Extensions are like three little bolt-ons to the browser. Now, one of these bolt-ons is called Momentum, and it's about keeping focused on your goals and gaining momentum, hence the name. When you open a new tab, once you've installed this, it comes up with a stunning image each day, and then it prompts you to enter what your focus of the day is. And then every time you open a new tab up, not only do you see a stunning image, what the weather is in your area, a to-do list built in as well, but it also comes up right in the middle of your screen, what's your focus today. And if you have one main focus that day, whether it might be exercise, research a property, contact someone, write a certain amount of words, contribute on the Property Hub forum, wherever it might be, wherever your focus that day is, it'll come up each time you open a new tab on. Super simple. Of course, it's free, like most extensions are. I don't know how they make the money. Maybe it's just someone very nice who's created it, but great extension, great app. Thank you, Guy, for sending us another blinder.
Yeah, and it's really useful to be reminded. Like I open new tabs probably hundreds of times a day, and it's nice every time you do that to get a quick reminder of what you should be focusing on. Because if you are about to sort of slope off and have a quick check of Facebook, it might just make you feel bad enough about it, and by reminding you of what you're supposed to be focusing on. And related to that, I read a blog post recently. I wish I could remember where it was, but it was from a guy who'd started having his friend call him every morning, and they would have to tell each other what their focus was for that day, what their most important task was. And by being accountable to another person, they found that they were far more likely to actually get it done. And if you're focusing on the one most important thing you can be doing, everything else kind of falls away. And even if you don't get anything else done, you've moved your business or your life or whatever it is forward. The power of focus is really important, and it might just seem like a silly little extension, but you might find it useful as well. So if you're a Chrome user, I definitely recommend you check it out, and the link is in the show notes, of course.
Wow. What an episode. Lots and lots packed in. I hope you've enjoyed it. We've loved, well, I certainly have, Rob. I've loved getting back to property. I've really missed it. I've been waiting for this episode because we pre-recorded, so we actually haven't done a podcast for weeks. We didn't know what to do at the beginning. So it's really nice to get back on track. Remember, if you're in the north, yeah, that's a big place, but if you're in the north, we're coming to Liverpool and we'd love to meet you. It's free to attend, so make that little journey over to Liverpool if you can. We're there from 3 till 6 on Easter Monday. We'll have a few drinks, catch up, talk property, and like the Property Hub, it'll be full of friendly people, I promise you.
Yeah, it definitely will. So the propertyhub.net/Liverpool is the place to go to book your tickets. And if you're not in the north, or if you are, either way, we would love to get your reviews. We're closing in on 200 reviews, which is just incredible. So is there going to be a prize for number 200? No, frankly, but it's going to be a good thing to do anyway. So please just leave us a review if you haven't already, and leave us a voicemail. If you want to leave us a voicemail, when you're looking at the show notes, you'll see a big button there that allows you to get in touch with us. So if you want to just say hello, or if you want to submit a question for a future episode, please do. We'd love to hear from you.
How about we do a different sound effect other than clapping?
Oh, don't get crazy now.
Oh, yeah. God, we're mixing it up. We'll talk off air. Okay, great. Well, next week, as we said, is the Pension Reforms podcast. This is going to be really important to listen to. So please make sure you join us. Tell other people to listen to this upcoming episode as well, because it will impact every single property investor in one way or another. So this is a must listen to episode next week. So join us then. But until then, everybody, have a fantastic week, and we'll catch up with you next Thursday.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.